3, 2, 1. Panel, ladies and gentlemen, democracies are imperfect, and that's precisely what gives it value. We can't cry democracy and cry system only at the point when it's convenient for us. We need to be able to take the range and host of possibilities. Constituents, politicians, and everyone involved cannot have their cake and eat it too. Before I move on to my extension, just a quick clarification coming from our side of the house, which we think is important to tackle a lot of things in opening half. Who exactly are we even pardoning to begin with, right? Because we think politicians who are abusive in terms of their power are unlikely to be prosecuted in the first place and even more unlikely to be convicted. And we think that even if they are convicted, there's a presidential pardon on the table for these individuals. Assuming that these things then do happen, we think that's precisely where public referenda becomes a last resort, and that last resort is good. It becomes the ultimate check and balance as opposed to being able to leave it in the hands of the current government, who opening teams did characterize might be negligent, might be ignorant, or might downright be malevolent. We think that when the referenda happens, it's not going to be like an automatic pardon, right? Meaning the counterfactual exists of not pardoning them. Meaning, if the public thinks that this individual is not worthy to be pardoned because they're a dick or what they did is bad against the state, then they can just vote not to pardon them. We think the more likely candidate for these particular things are precisely opposition groups and leaders who are actually labeled and red tagged as enemies of the political elite and enemies of the state, the very people we need to prop into power to be able to hold states accountable, assuming that the state is negligent. What is my extension? Responses will be integrated. Why do we have referenda, and why are these political crimes a legitimate extension of that? Number one, it allows us to be able to empower whistleblowers and political opposition to be able to coalesce together, bolster opposition ideals, and really be able to put pressure against the state. The state who has abused its power for far too long, the state who actually might even be cahoots with these particular crimes, right? We think in instances where the state is not a dick and that they're actually good, then people can vote accordingly. You can pardon or not pardon. The goal here is to be able to swing moderates and people on the fence who often comprise the majority, people who need to be able to make an informed decision. Why is that informed decision important? Second point, right? This participation in referenda, especially in political crimes, is a legitimate extension of the democratic process, right? Meaning, we want to be able to shatter the veil of political apathy and ignorance at the point in which people don't just view democracies as just completely procedural. They need to understand that democracies are also substantive in nature, meaning it doesn't just end when I vote this politician to power and when they suck, I just cry and wait for the next election. It creates an incentive structure to be more nationalistic, take things seriously, which reinforce democracies when they participate in referenda. The third is, when these particular people are potentially pardoned, the state now loses the veil of legitimacy to be able to quell dissent. Because there may be a line of attack in saying, oh, what if this person's pardoned? And it leads to like radicalization against that individual and against that people. But now, in terms of the process, it takes away the power of the state and actually makes what they're doing worse and worse off at the point in which they continue doing that, at the point in which they're already pardoned, right? It legitimizes now rallies and opposition parties, and you actually get less polarization. What do we hear from opening opposition, right? Number one, they say people are dumb, uninformed, and fall victim to herd mentality, like what we see with gerrymandering. We think that following their logic, then bro, why do we even have voting to begin with? Let's just let these smart technocrat people participate and choose what's happening. We think that the reason why we particularly have elections is so that people can actually be responsible for those particular things. All of these risks are exactly what make a democracy valuable in the name of Vox Populi, voice of the people. Besides, the average Joe on the ground doesn't have to have a PhD in business and economics or political economy to understand that, oh, it's bad when my government silences opposition leaders who are actually fighting for these populist agendas and ideas which are very important to me on the ground. We think that when these particular individuals make, let's say, a wrong decision to vote someone into power, it becomes the ultimate Control-Z undo button to be able to hold the state accountable. So for instance, I voted a crappy leader by accident or out of negligence. Oh my gosh. And he now quells opposition parties. That is now the point in which I can pardon that particular referenda through that referenda to be able to allow that particular opposition party to flourish. We think that in order to take these particular elections seriously, people need to be able to involve in the process in order to have true opposition. But before that, go ahead. Opening up.
Your case is uncomparative. There exist institutions like literally the parliament that votes in for policies every time. Elections just happen every 4 years. That's a short enough time for like these institutions to happen anyway.
Yeah, but the problem is people are gonna what? Like jerk off and like wonder what's gonna happen and wait 4 years to be able to fix things? That's exactly what breeds political apathy. Wherein people vote someone crappy, they pray for time to go faster when that person leaves. But we think that these particular opposition leaders who represent these particular populist ideologies are being labeled and rag-tagged as an enemy of the state, and we should have the choice and participation to like forgive or not forgive these particular individuals. The worst case on our side is that even if we pardon people who shouldn't be, then that becomes legitimacy for the state to say, hey, you made a wrong decision, and it pushes the state to have to inform people about these particular things, breeding more transparency and collaboration among their people. In terms of a lot of what the DLO said, a lot of these things are unimpactful red herrings. In terms of misinformation, we have journalist integrity and social media to be able to quell that. In terms of it being dangerous to people who are affected because of the rise of like terrorism and stuff, we think that in status quo, those people might even do it. As opposed to on our side, when we're able to like tell the state that this person was pardoned, it no longer gives them a principle to like legitimize their oppression against them because this person was now pardoned, they've already served their sentence. Ultimately, on our side of the house in CG, you get an incentive structure for people to be involved, and you create the true heart of what opposition stands for that actually paves the way for a better, brighter democracy we are very proud to propose.